Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk about the books that didn't really work for me. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a DNF. Now this one here is Wicked in His Arms by Stacy Reid. I really tried to finish this book, but for some reason I had a hard time getting through this. I kept falling asleep, and then there were times I was getting distracted and wasn't paying attention to it, and I'd have to stop. I don't know. I don't know why this book just didn't work for me. So I got about 64% in, and I was just like, I'm done. So I can't remember the heroine's name, but there's the hero, Tobias. Now, him and the heroine, literally like bump into each other while riding on horseback, and she kind of like gives him a hard time, like, you know, why don't you watch where you're going, kind of thing. And so he is kind of like instantly lusting after her, like he's attracted to her, obviously attracted to her body, you know, and all that stuff. And it was kind of like very, I don't know, to me it felt a little bit shallow, that his main focus was like, you know, oh, what would it be like to like bed her? And I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of like the lustful thoughts that are in a man's head. And I'm like, I don't want to hear the lustful thoughts in this man's head. I don't know what it was. I just looks like, okay. I'm like, is there anything else besides her body that you're attracted to? Like, is there anything else you like about her? So, they kind of like skirt around each other for like, you know, the first 30%. And she's essentially staying at his home because his mother's trying to get her like wed off. And she's, I guess you'd say, she's a troubled type of heroine because she gets herself into trouble with stupid shit, you know, and she very much reminded me of more of like a modern day heroine. And to me, it's like, I mean, you have to act a certain way. During that time, you have to act a certain way. It's just how it was, unfortunately. It's just how it was. You know, in order for you to attract a suitor, attract a man who wants to basically marry you and take over the payments. That's basically what it is. That's what it was for these women. The father could only take care of his daughter or daughters for as long as he could. And then, you know, you have to have some other man take over the payments, you know, since women couldn't work during that time. You know, they weren't allowed to work and hold jobs and all that shit. So, you know, so of course the woman has to rely on the man for everything. And the way she was acting was like, you know, like, oh, I don't really want to get married. And I'm like, you kind of really have no choice. So it's like, if you're going to get married, it's better to kind of get married to somebody who you can tolerate for the rest of your life, you know, essentially. I mean, it sounds kind of depressing when you think about it, but that's pretty much how it was back in that day, you know. So she acts very modern, and I really just didn't care for it. And so they kind of like skirt around each other, and like within the 30% of the book, he was pulling her into a closet because he thought that she was his mistress, because his mistress was basically like trying to get him back, and he was pretty much like, no, we're done, you know, no more. And so he ends up pulling her into a closet, and they have hanky-panky. And I was like, wow, it was like really quick. It was like very quick. And even like, what kind of bothered me was like, usually when you read a romance, the love scenes kind of like stretch out a little bit, where maybe it's at least like half a chapter or so. Like, I'd say probably at least 3 or 4 pages in a book. You'll find like the love scene where it's like, you know, the guy kind of like he warms up the oven before he sticks in the turkey, you know. And for this here, it was like 2 pages, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, done. And it was like not a lot of description. And so I'm thinking, like, obviously this is probably more Stacy Reid, the beginner, like when she first started out and stuff like that, writing her romances. Because sometimes it takes time for you to kind of like set a certain way that you write, you know. And so maybe she was still trying to get her feet wet kind of thing, you know. So with this one here, it's like very quick, and it was done and over with, and they end up getting discovered, and he's like, oh, well, I'll marry her. And then his sister ends up taking off with the steward. And the brothers are pissed, of course, you know. Tobias is mad. And he goes and chases after his sister, and the heroine decides to tag along with him. They end up getting, like, accosted by this young... It's like a young guy, you know, trying to rob them. And it annoyed me in this one scene where she was like, how dare you, saying like she was with some guy who was a duke or earl or something like that. And she's like, oh, you know, I'm with this person and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, lady, you do not admit that you're with a titled gentleman, because that means it's going to be fatter the purse, you know, kind of thing. This guy's going to want more money and stuff, you know. So she annoyed me there, and I was like, shut up, idiot. Oh, she was so dumb. And then they go and they meet up and manage to get to her sister, and get to his sister, and end up finding out the steward is married and has children. And you're like, wow, dude. Wow. So this guy's a fortune hunter, you know, just looking for money. And so she's like, I had no idea. And I'm like, oh my God. You know, come on, girl. You have money. Your brother has a title. There's going to be fortune hunters out there, man. Come on. You know, so she annoyed me, and I was at the point where I'm like, oh, I just couldn't continue with the book. And it's a shame too, because it's a really pretty cover. But I was just like, ugh, not digging it. I was not digging it. And so I ended up going into, I'm trying to get through some of like Julia Quinn books I have. So I ended up reading Just Like Heaven by Julia Quinn. And this one here, unfortunately, I ended up giving it a 3. It was okay. It was okay. So we got Honoria and Marcus. Now, I felt sorry for Marcus because... Yes.
And now we're going chicken.
Okay, good job.
Yeah.
Can you throw that away? Throw the carton away?
I threw it away.
Okay, good job. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. So Marcus grew up in a home where his father pretty much gave him anything money could buy, but he wasn't around much. The father wasn't around much. I think the mother died or something like that. And so Marcus was very lonely. Like if he went home to his father, because he'd be at school or whatever it was, you know, he befriended Honoria's brother at the school. And so whenever he'd go home, it was like he'd be alone with like the maids and shit, you know, maids and the servants and all that stuff. And his father would pretty much be like off on his, you know, doing whatever. So, you know, Marcus was very neglected, you know, mentally and physically, you know, neglected. You know, obviously, you know, he had everything else, but, you know, didn't have a family around. So he ends up befriending and getting really close with Honoria's brother. I can't remember the brother's name, but ends up getting really close to the brother. And so, you know, Honoria was pretty much like, kind of like the annoying little bug. That's what her brother pretty much called her, Bug. She was like this annoying little bug because she was like, I think 4 years younger than her brother. And so she'd always want to follow her brother around. And he was, you know, pretty much telling Marcus, like, don't acknowledge her. Don't acknowledge her. Don't look at her. Don't talk to her. She'll just bug us. And so Marcus felt bad for her when they were little, and he was like, he started, you know, to become her friend. And so they grew up together. So it's very much like childhood friends to lovers. The things that I had, the problem I had with this book, it was kind of silly. I think I've pretty much grown out of Julia Quinn as a writer. I used to really like her books. I think Julia Quinn's definitely one of those authors, like, if you're first stepping into historical romance, I think she'd be a great author to step into, because some of her books are kind of more lighthearted and silly, you know? They definitely have more silliness to it. And so with this one here, it definitely had that in a sense. But I would say, like, what kind of bugged me about this book is that most of the book, it was like a caretaking book where Honoria's out somewhere and Marcus pretty much follows her. You know, they're grown at the time. And he's kind of looking out for her because her brother ended up doing something, and he ended up having a duel with this other guy, and he shot the other guy, and I think he killed the guy or severely injured him, something like that. So her brother had to go away for a while, you know, and so he had told Marcus, like, keep an eye on my sister, make sure she doesn't marry some idiot, you know. And so Marcus pretty much has kind of like pushed away some other guys throughout the years of like trying to court her and stuff like that. And so Marcus starts to, you know, you could see like he starts feeling attracted to her. You know, he wants her for himself. And so they're out somewhere, and he ends up falling in this like hole or something, ends up twisting his ankle. And so it's pretty much like her fault, you know, Honoria's fault. And so he twists his ankle, he gets home, and how many days later, one of his maid, I think it was his maid or something like that, I think it was like the head maid, ended up getting a hold of Honoria and telling her, like, hey, you know, the Marcus is really sick, or whatever his name was. I think, was he a duke or something? I can't remember. But she ends up saying, like, he's really sick, he's got a fever, we don't know how to help him. So Honoria, you know, gets the assistance of her mother, you know, and says, Mom, can you come with me? You know, I need to make sure that Marcus is okay. So most of this book is pretty much Marcus, like, unconscious or in his bed, sick, and Honoria and her mother taking care of him. Now, what happens is his ankle was swollen. So he ended up taking like shears or you know, like scissors or whatever to cut his boot off. And he ended up cutting his ankle. And that ankle ended up getting an infection. And so Honoria's mother had to cut away because she had nursed her husband back to health years ago. So she knew what to do, you know. And so she had to cut away at like dead skin, of like rotted skin. And her and Honoria, like, most of the book is trying to save him because he would have died. You know, he basically could have got sepsis and died, you know. And so most of the book was pretty much her and Honoria's mother taking care of Marcus. And so I'm like, I like caretaking scenes, but I don't want that much of the book with the caretaking scene. So it was a lot of most of the book was that. Then Marcus ended up getting, he ended up surviving and getting better. And then she goes off to London to have a season. And so he starts to like pursue her and all that stuff. And, you know, then they ended up getting together. So for me, I was like, it was okay. I wanted it to be better. And that it was okay. That's why I ended up giving it a 3. Because I was like, it was all right. You know, nothing terrible. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't, you know, great. So that's pretty much all that I read for, you know, DNFs and, you know, stuff like that. Let me see. Was there any other DNFs? I think some of the other DNFs I had were like thrillers and stuff like that. So yeah, that was pretty much it. But yeah, that's it for this video here. You know, this month is kind of like, you know, like, I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a reading slump, but it's like, I'm just not finding, you know, a lot of books this month that I really could sink my teeth into and really enjoy. Like, some of them I'm reading, I'm kind of like, you know, they're okay, but nothing special. So I don't know what it is. I have no idea. All I know is that I have not had a really great reading month. But yeah, that's it really for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And I will see you all on the next video. All right. Bye.